So, looks like we're recording visual
Yeah.
and audio today. That's great. Okay, let's get tapped in and welcome to you, Corey Keyes. You are a psychologist and a sociologist. And I thought it was fun that in the book you say about sociologists that they are more interested in understanding how systems can fail than putting blame on individuals. And in fact, that it's often the system itself that can rob us from agency to create better lives lined up with our own values. I thought that was pretty great to say that
Yes.
about your own category.
hmm It's very true. Yes. I think we spend too much time trying to solve problems in the world by thinking that resides within people.
Individualizing the problem.
Mm,
Right. So today we are talking about your new book, Languishing: How to Feel Alive Again in a World That Wears Us Down. Apropos individualizing the problem. And yeah, I've read the first part of the book, and that's what we're gonna talk about today. And then we'll, fingers crossed, have a second part of an interview with you. And you have this song that you recommend. You actually have a few songs you recommended.
mhm,
But the first one is Running on Empty. It's pretty nice.
mm.
Well, what does that mean to you, that song?
Well, it at first, as a young man, it meant that there was somebody out there in the world who understood emptiness in the way that I was experiencing it. And as a young teenager growing up in a very rural and small town, I felt very alone with those feelings. And so when I heard the lyrics, I thought, oh my goodness, there's somebody else out there. And Jackson Brown isn't that much older than I am. He was a young man early in his career. And this, I think, was his live album. And I think he was writing about what it feels like to be an artist on the road, as they say, going from one show to the next every day. And I think it was right. And there's this sense as an artist that you're giving away everything that you have. And it often comes back to you some days from the reaction from the audience, but sometimes it's not. And no matter what reaction you get from your audience, even if they love it, I still think you feel this gnawing emptiness as you tour. And that's the way a musician tours the world, is the way we live our lives sometimes. And I
Mm.
felt that as a young teenager. I was not rooted yet into a place.
I think that's very, very recognizable for especially young people, right? Not being rooted into a place. And then
No.
also later running on empty, like giving too much, not being anchored in yourself and in your body.
Yes. Yes.
So, Corey, I mean, your book is amazing. It's also an amazing story you have. I'm really fascinated by it because you were involved with the launch of positive psychology, the movement.
Mhm.
And when I Google you, like the first thing that comes up is that you were known for being a part of the positive psychology movement.
Yeah.
And then something happened. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's yes. I was one of the 18 young scholars that had been selected. So we were handpicked out of a very large number of names that had been submitted by senior scholars. So Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi wrote letters to all the people they knew around the world who were very senior and asked them to nominate their best or brightest, most creative uh, person they had trained or thought, right, it was the most creative, talented, or whatnot. And from that list, as I was told, they selected 18 of us. And they chose young because I think they wanted a group of young people who were just starting their career, who were hungry, motivated, eager to publish a lot and prove their worth. And we would meet in Acumal, Mexico, during the holiday break, the Christmas holiday break. And it was a beautiful place to go. I mean, the 18 of us, along with Martin Seligman, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and sometimes the CEO of the American Psychologists Association, Ray Fowler, and Don Clifton, who was the owner of Gallup, was there as well.
Okay.
And so it was the very first meeting was mysterious, if you will. We could figure out, we could sense that there was this idea that someone wanted to start something. But we couldn't tell who was behind it. And I think I remember by the end of the first meeting, I asked a question. I said, I get this sense that there's somebody who's funding this, who is interested in funding this, but we don't know who it is. And when I go back to my university, I want to be able to tell them that we have a reputable, right, funding source, because we were getting the sense that there were some religious types of overtones.
I'm getting that feeling as you talk about it, for sure. Yeah.
Yes, and we didn't know at the time that the Templeton Foundation was very interested in starting this, along with the Gallup organization. Obviously, Don Clifton was there. And so I was a little, I didn't feel comfortable after the first meeting, because it seemed to me all the ideas were being funneled through two people, and we were brought in to be worker bees.
Mm-hmm.
And right, it's sort of like the money was there, they wanted to fund it, but it had to go through Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and they already had some ideas and a set of ideas that they wanted to pursue. And that's actually really the way it worked. If you were willing to do their work and focus on what they wanted, the funders, you were welcome. But you have to keep in mind that positive psychology in some respects isn't a true paradigm shift. It didn't happen naturally. It was because these big pots of money came along, kind of like a startup company. They wanted to invest in something and create something because they wanted something to happen, and they wanted to use science to create credibility for their ideas, these funders. And I was already doing what I was doing. I didn't need positive psychology to come along because I had the MacArthur Foundation, which had already supported this.
What were you doing before positive psychology?
Well, the MacArthur Foundation is a legitimate foundation, just like Templeton,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't have one focus. They don't have a particular focus, and so they looked out into the world and they saw the aging population long before. Right now, we are in an aging world. The baby boom generation, everyone's heard about them.
Yeah.
Well, they're well into retirement, and long before they saw it coming, and so they wanted science to help prepare and create a scientific basis to encourage people to age what they were calling successfully, more healthy, more positively. So this was in the early 1990s, and that decade of the 1990s. And so a lot of research was done, and studies were being done all around well-being and aging constructively and positively. And so, and let's face it, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi was doing flow research in the 1980s. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of all this positive stuff going on long before positive psychology came along. So I did not want people telling me what to do and what to focus on. I just don't need. It's not that I'm stubborn in the sense that I have a passion and a purpose. So if you're not willing to fund that, I'm fine. I'm going to continue to do what I do. I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing and help you out unless you're interested in helping me out.
Yeah.
And so it all went one way in positive psychology. If you weren't supporting them, they wouldn't give you money, they wouldn't give you awards, they wouldn't bring attention to your work. And I was like, well, I don't care about that stuff. To me, science is a slow process of building up studies and credibility and legitimacy. And so I just left it. I was like, it seems too artificial to me. It's being built from the top down rather than the bottom up. It was being built from a top down. And I was like, the MacArthur Foundation didn't tell us what to focus on. It just said, go, bring the best and brightest scientists together and focus on aging and try to use the theme of aging successfully so people are healthier. They didn't say focus on character strengths. They didn't say focus only on happiness. Right? That's the point, right? It's like they gave us the freedom to define successful aging in whatever way we wanted.
I mean, it's very relatable that it shouldn't be just one way. And like you said, passion, purpose, and integrity as well, right? You can't just do therapy research in a field that you don't honestly believe is the best. But so what you talked about with aging, that was the foundation you were in before the positive psychology.
Yes, aging and social psychology, but my focus was always on what we tend to call well-being, but in a very comprehensive way. I was very interested in going about beyond this focus on happiness, on feeling good, which was there. That's always been an interest. You don't have to do much to get the public interested in that topic. Everyone seems to always want to talk about happiness, but they didn't want to talk about that other type of well-being, which is about, human excellence or eudaimonia or that, right, functioning well. And so I loved working with Carol Riff because she was doing that kind of work when I arrived at University of Wisconsin, and we struck up a wonderful, wonderful relationship. And we never looked back. We forged ahead and looking at well-being more comprehensively than just about feeling good.
But you were in positive psychology for more than one meeting, correct?
Yes. After the third meeting, I could see the writing on the wall, and I was like,
Okay.
They were not going to support my work, and so I was like, oh, fine. You could have said that early on. Because I'm not going to stop what I'm doing to help you if you're not going to help me. So I didn't need your help when I arrived, and I don't need it now. But I'm really interested in collaborating if that's what you want to do. Because that's what the MacArthur Foundation was all about. We collaborated, we shared ideas, we worked together. We didn't have one person saying you can only focus on X rather than Y.
Doesn't sound too healthy.
No, it was not. It was not. And in fact, you could see critiques of positive psychology emerging within the first decade that's saying it was too dogmatic, it was very narrow. And so I was fine for them. Let them go do what they want to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. And
has it sort of affected your work in that way that what you do and what you stand up for now is in contrast to it as well, because you do have that saying in your book that the fixation we have on happiness is a concern, and that we should look at
Mhm.
a set of deeper needs. I think you alluded to that just before. So,
Yes.
so is your work in a way contrasting what you were just about to get more involved with in positive psychology?
Yes, here's what's happened. As Carol Riff, myself, and others who are very passionate about this, we worked very hard and published a lot of very good scientific articles using very good data, large representative sample population-based data. We were not doing what psychologists do, which are these little convenient samples. And so we had been published, and it's a longitudinal study. Uh, uh, it started in 1995, and it's still going.
Oh,
And in 2025, we will be re-interviewing the same people, and we've been refreshing the sample because some people die, of course, but it's still going. That's how amazing this study was. So we built up a large scientific database. And so all of a sudden, what we were arguing about from the outside in, suddenly people within psychology, positive psychology, were starting to do the same thing and claim it as their own. So in some ways, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
yeah.
But
Take it like that.
yeah. The problem is they seem to portray their work as though they thought it up all on their own, but
Mm.
they didn't. And so there's a saying in science: it only works by science makes progress by building on each other's work,
Yeah.
building on each other's work, and that's still the way I believe I need to operate. I don't try to destroy anybody's ideas
Mm.
or destroy their reputation in order for me to get attention, nor do I sort of ignore that somebody else was already working in an area. I cite them, and if I'm using some of their ideas, and that's the way science makes progress. But there was an element in positive psychology where it became so publicly popular that there was so much money to be made that people were in such demand to go make appearances and consult and talk and publish books that I think
Mm.
ego became much more important than scientific progress. And so I was glad I stepped away. I just don't need that. I don't believe in self-promotion. I believe your work should speak for itself. And that's just my philosophy. I mean, we live in a very different world now where everyone's posting things on LinkedIn like, oh, I'm so happy to accept this wonderful award. And it sounds so humble, but it's like we're always drawing attention to whatever little thing we've accomplished. And I'm like, science isn't interested in one little accomplishment, it's in the body of evidence, the whole body of evidence. That's where progress is made.
This is beautiful, and it really reminds me of a signature, a clear signature you have in your chart, in your birth chart, that you are a Scorpio, which is wonderful because then you can regenerate and move on from major crises as well. And what I'm hearing here is that you have Neptune conjunct your sun. So that makes the way that you are Scorpio very Piscean. I mean, I'm just saying this to people who know the language. But
Mm.
and that means the bigger picture, and it definitely means being selfless and occupied with what's better for the whole than just your individual status, for example.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's
So,
always been a part of me. The reason I've struggled to work through all that I had to work through from the beginning of my life and through the trauma and whatnot was I wanted to be useful to the world.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah, yeah.
And then I'll be very happy on my deathbed. I'll be very happy
Yes,
because you can have whatever this gift is. You don't have to see it as a gift, but this is what I see as my gift for you.
exactly,
That's
exactly.
it.
Yeah. So, what is that deeper set of needs? What is deeper than happiness, because as you say, it is easy to make happiness popular. What else is there?
Well, when you look at the questions on the measurement tool that I use, that's called the mental health continuum, each one of those, after the first three questions, which are all about the feeling good stuff, right? Questions 4 through 14 each get at a very particular slice of what makes life worthwhile is the way, and what makes life meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
So you have things like in the social well-being, there's at least 5 facets of social well-being. Not the least of which is this integration, right? Human beings have most of us have this strong desire to belong to something bigger than ourselves. Just like honeybees are programmed to be part of a hive. They each have a function within that hive. So they belong to something bigger than themselves. And from that belonging, they get a sense of where they can contribute things of worth and value. Each one of them has a job. And without fulfilling that job each day, the hive does not function, the whole does not function well. So we're just like that hive. We need to contribute things of worth and value. We want to. Life doesn't always afford us and give us the opportunities to do that, nor do they always value us all equally, right? So,
well said, well said.
Yeah, that's true. None of this stuff that we want is a given. It's not automatic. We have to work very hard to get it and create it. And we often have to fight for it and try to create a world and change the world so it becomes a better place for most people. That's why that a third dimension is this sense of social growth. Are we part of a world that's becoming a better place for all people? And then we are human beings who try to make sense of the world, not just ourselves. And so in social well-being, there's this desire to make sense of what's going on in the world around you, to understand it. It's a very challenging world we live in right now, politically and socially and culturally. And we see the rise of authoritarianism. And I think it's very hard for many people to understand where is this coming from? I don't understand the society I'm now lived in. I thought I understood it. So there's a variety of things in social well-being that we're all working to try to make a better world, not the least of which the last dimension is, are we accepting of other people? Right? Social acceptance, right? Yeah. And then there's 6 dimensions of psychological well-being, one of which is self-acceptance. Do you like who you are and what you're becoming? There's purpose in life, a sense of personal growth, a sense of what we call mastery. Are you able to manage your life and your responsibilities? Do you have warm, trusting relationships with other people? It's amazing to me. Those are the things that I'm talking about when I talk about a deeper set of needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it makes so much sense. Even the first part, I guess that's the more sociologist part of it, with understanding the world around you and not feeling alienated, for example. But
Exactly.
if we had a positive psychologist here, would that person say, "Oh, none of that is relevant"? I mean, probably they'd say yes to some of that would be important for mental health or not.
Well, I don't. Truth is, right now, I think some psychologists are trying to work on this global flourishing idea. Again, is an interest. Templeton Foundation is now funding a whole global flourishing initiative. And their starting basis is to argue, just assume out of hand, that everything that we've been doing here in the West is irrelevant to every other culture. Like what I just listed, a sense of coherence, a sense of belonging, a sense of contribution, a sense of purpose, that somehow those are very Western and elitist. And I have never thought that to myself, because I grew up in a very working class, very, we would call it low income relatively poor, just getting by. Uh, the people I knew in my family too wanted the very same things that I was just talking about. They wanted to contribute things of worth and value to their
Yeah.
family, their community, and their neighborhood. They wanted to feel that they belonged to something bigger.
Yeah.
They wanted to be able to make sense just like everyone else of what's going on around them in the world.
Mm.
They want to have a life that's meaningful and has direction. They want to be challenged to become a better person. That's why they choose religion more often than not, right? And we demonize that just because people who are less educated, have lower incomes, or people in poorer countries are drawn to religion as if it's a crutch. No, it's an institution that challenges them to grow and become a better human being. It's like,
Interesting.
I
Mm.
mean, so right now, I bet they would say, "Oh, all that stuff you do, Corey, is so culturally insensitive." And I'm like, "You're just no." Good
Yeah.
luck with that argument. But because I'd like you to figure out, does every culture have a very only unique set of needs? I doubt it. I think we're a lot more similar than we are different.
And that's actually I'm not trying to take the conversation somewhere else. I'm just reflecting on the astrology of it because Neptune is that common the commonality, that thing that we have that everyone is united within, if you can put it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I just think that it's a I find this theme of cultural work I think it's very important. Don't get me wrong. I think it's really important to make sure that what you're measuring makes sense around the world
Yeah.
and that you're creating a good measure. Um, that I can get behind in using science and statistics and rigorous techniques. But just walking around using the critique like now we need to do this because it's got to be culturally insensitive without much evidence, it's a crux.
Hmm.
It's like you're making up arguments to say that what you're doing is important. So if you want to do something important, go out and do it and then tell me, rather than creating up this false narrative that somehow builds up what you're doing now. Just because I do understand right now there's a lot of people who have been marginalized throughout the world,
Yeah.
and we want to speak our voices, all of us, and be seen and heard.
Hmm.
And I think the emergence of that suggests that we have different experiences. And you know why? Because to be marginalized is to live a very different life from people who have lived very non-marginalized, privileged lives. It's true. That
Yes.
doesn't that doesn't mean culturally and personally we're
Um,
vastly different. It
right.
just means we're coming from very different worlds
Worlds.
of
Yeah.
experience. And we want the same damn things. Why do you think we would be fighting so hard for the things that you have?
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
want some of what you take for granted,
Yeah.
right? I was like,
Absolutely.
okay,
Yeah.
anyway, I think what they would do is say, wow, the big argument now is like we got to be culturally relevant. And I'm like, well, I think we are already. I'm not saying we're perfect, but so
Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing is you are appealing to what's common in humanity, right?
I think in the end, we're going to find that we have a lot more in common than we have differences. I think culture is to be celebrated, yes. And language is to be preserved, and culture is to be preserved, and spiritual traditions are to be preserved. Just because those are different doesn't mean we have a deeply different set of needs.
Mm. Okay, good. So I'm just scrolling back and forth between my questions here, but let's get to you. You mentioned flourishing, but maybe first we should understand languishing.
Mhm.
Is this
Yeah.
a no? Is it a term people know about? I didn't know it.
They know it personally. They did not know a lot of people did not have a label for it. They did not
Right.
have a word for it. And I think um, more people experienced it during the pandemic because, for obvious reasons, the pandemic took a lot of the things that we took for granted that were good for our well-being. It arrested it, it stopped it, it took it away. And so during that period, people who would not normally have felt that very much felt languishing for the first time. And they were struggling. They were like, well, is this depression? It doesn't feel like depression. It surely isn't anxiety. Yes, I feel a little worried about what's going on in the world, but I don't feel like I have anxiety. I just feel like I'm going through the world that each day like I'm daydreaming,
Mm.
right? Yeah, I don't know. I try to tell people just sit back and daydream for a moment and hold it for a minute. That's what languishing is like. Just to go through every day, just like you're daydreaming. It's you're kind of your eyes are half open. You kind of vaguely see the world. You're half invisible. The world's half invisible. You're not doing anything. You're not going anywhere. You don't feel anything, much of anything, good or bad.
I mean, with the pandemic, there's two ways to look at it. One is that it came up because we were facing ourselves, but also when networking, socializing is taken away from us, it's not mentally healthy.
No, not at all. No, in fact, it was a good reminder, I think,
Yeah,
because I think human
yeah,
beings can start when things are going okay, going well. I think we forget the things that are good and valuable,
yeah.
and we can easily let them go without knowing it at times. And suddenly, this is a reminder of the things we need to cherish, to protect.
Exactly. Yeah. Corey, can I just read your definition
Hmm.
of languishing? Okay,
Yeah.
so if we understand languishing as the absence of emotional, psychological, or social well-being, the sad truth is that yes, young children can demonstrate what researchers call a failure to flourish. In
Mm.
fact, in rare cases, toddlers can show signs of major depression, though the symptoms are easy to miss. They may not even seem sad to their parents. Symptoms can range from flat affect to increased clinginess.
Yeah. Yes, I was reviewing a study that before the age of 5, you could begin to see upwards of 3 out of 10 children failing to flourish. That is, that they're languishing to some degree, right? They don't have a warm connection to their primary caregivers. They don't seem curious or engaged in the world. They are disengaged. They're sort of stagnant. Um, they don't demonstrate much of affect, especially the positive stuff. Um, and that's an early warning sign. Now, there's some reasons sometimes for some of them. They may actually have some early form some illnesses that maybe we need to. If I were to recommend to parents listening to this, if they see that their kid is acting sort of like what we describe as languishing, I would go have them uh, a serious medical checkup for everything from hearing to eyesight and so forth, to check, because sometimes early on when kids have what we might call disabilities, emotionally, physically, or behaviorally, they begin early in life to show that as if they're languishing.
Mhm.
And for some,
Is
and the
it what
study should,
you
oh, go ahead.
is it what is also called masking, that you have to mask it?
Well, I don't think it could be. And I think what is happening is the kids are sending out signals that they don't have all their senses aren't working to their proper level so that they can engage with the world. Sometimes that's because they were born with certain disabilities that we're not paying attention to, or sometimes it's because the primary relationship in the home environment is simply not conducive to encouraging this. But yes, it's amazing to me that by the age of 5, 37% of kids, young children, were already showing signs of languishing.
And so this is your analysis, that this is what's wrong with the world. Is that what you're saying with languishing?
Well, I think the way we want to understand this is, I think there it's pretty high in teenagers, adolescents. In the United States, it's around 40 to 50% of teenagers are languishing.
And when you are languishing, it's you don't exactly know what you feel, and you go through life half awake.
You could actually feel somewhat happy there, right? But you might not be functioning well. You may not have any sense of direction or meaning in your life. You might not feel like the things that you're being challenged with are really interested in you becoming a better person. So you might not have a sense of personal growth, even though the whole world around you is saying, go to school, learn and grow and mature. You might feel that this is not at all challenging you to become a better person. There's all kinds of reasons that I think the beginning of life does not send the message to young people that they're functioning well, that their life is highly managed. So if you ask them, are you able to manage your daily responsibilities? Well, they probably don't, because their whole life is structured for them from outside in.
Yeah.
If you were to ask them, are you being challenged to become a better person? I could see young people saying, no, well, every day I go to school, I do the same thing. I don't get to do the things that I'm interested in or express my creativity, or nobody wants me to be helping in the world. So how can I be a good person? My family forces me to go to religious activities that I have no idea why.
This is so important. It is so important that someone is speaking about this. And we have actually a current debate in Denmark. I'm not sure how big it is. It's just something I saw on the news about a critique about the school. Young people in the latest classes are saying, we didn't get anything out of the 10 years we were in school. And, from then on, they can somewhat choose themselves. But in the beginning, they don't have that choice. And in my time, no one spoke about it. At least we're speaking about it, right? It's important.
Oh, I know. I think they need to say more about that, because I think childhood has become less and less free. There's less and less freedom to choose and do what you want, because what I see missing in education is that kids are learning all this technical stuff, skills for the marketplace, but they're not learning about themselves, each other, and the world, and how to live better lives. We assume that kids are becoming equipped for life just because they're getting skills that are useful to a job. That doesn't mean they're learning about themselves, each other, and getting better at doing life. It just means they're getting prepared to do a job. A job is not a life, right? It's part of it.
Oh my God. Yeah, this is so major. It is so major. You have a point in the book somewhere where you say parents are obsessed, I think you say, with finding a good school for their children. And you say it's actually not the important thing. And I'm a parent myself, and I can see myself in that. Like, I want them to get into a good school. But what is your point in saying that's actually not the most important?
Well, I think we childhood has become less and less free because as parents, we realize that going to college, getting into college has become more and more important for a good career,
Mm.
a good job. And so I think kids feel more and more orchestrated,
Yeah.
right? You're just conducting their life. They're
Mm.
not singing their song, they're singing your song. You're the
Mm.
conductor.
Mm.
They're just holding an instrument, their mind, and you're playing it. They're not playing their own instruments.
Mm.
It's the best analogy I can say. And
Yeah, it's a
I
good
don't,
one.
right, I don't, I get it. I understand why parents want to do everything they can to get them into good schools so they get them into good colleges. But I'm telling you, I taught at one of the best colleges in the United States, and yet still, my students were taking my seminar on well-being. And it was the first time they ever had a chance to even engage in literature and science that had anything to do with informing them about living a good life beyond just being a worker, an employee.
Mm. This is so
Every,
important. Yeah.
right. And so they learned about all, I mean, I still get emails from my former students 10 years from ago. I've taught these kids, and they're still out in the world applying lessons that they learned in this one seminar, which was about taking the literature on happiness and well-being and helping them to apply it to their life and formulating a life not just about work, but about living well.
I mean, yeah. Do you recognize it yourself? You say you have a Catholic background, and I know for my upbringing as also in a religion, I certainly was
Mhm.
not taught about how to live life, and I didn't even think in those ways before after I had children myself. I mean, poor children, right? I wished for them that I had a mother who knew how to flourish, which is the word you're using,
Mhm.
contra to languishing, right?
Well, I think religions are, it's, it has such potential to, for helping us to learn about life, because really when you look at any holy book, they teach the lessons in terms of stories,
Hmm.
and a really good religious spiritual leader will take those stories each day or each week and help you engage, apply them to your life, where things went wrong and where we all fail, and how to actually pick yourself up and grow and learn and try to do better each week. Because we're storytellers and we live by stories. And
But
the
is
problem
that
what
the sociology lens you have on when you say that? Because it's in how people develop, and then religion is good for that, even getting some sense of doing better. Uh, but because I also hear you say that what you from your upbringing that you learned to uh, admitting and atoning for your sins, and that is not either to flourish, to live, feel fully alive.
well what I did, well my point in is it's very hard as a young person living in a world that we live today, to think that religion is helpful when we tell the stories very literally, that like they were told thousands of years ago.
Okay,
A good
right.
religious leader takes the lesson, extracts it, and makes it very relevant to our lives right now. And when I started teaching my courses that way and tried to make them relevant to young people's lives today, I it became a I was more helpful as a teacher. I inspired my kids more, and religious leaders could do that. But I think there's also practices in religion like confession, uh, uh, redemption, atonement. All of those things were very good lessons for me, because here's an amazing a fact. People who are flourishing are much higher on the personality disposition to apologize. Now think about that. Why it's right? Why do we apologize?
So it's easier for them to apologize.
Yeah,
Well,
they make mistakes,
yeah,
right? People are people are flourishing, make just like people are languishing, make mistakes. The difference is people are flourishing know that you could that's not a defining moment. It's a moment
yes,
for growth.
yeah,
It's a moment for saying, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I hurt you. I will try to do better. You reconnect. You learn how to redeem yourself in the
hmm
eyes of other people and move forward. If you're languishing, what's remarkable to me, it's not because you're less likely to apologize, not because you don't make mistakes, but perhaps because you haven't learned that it's okay to admit your humanity, admit you make mistakes, and atone for them. Just say
yeah.
you're sorry and grow and learn.
But in that, I think there's also a category of, let's say, religious people or something of the sorts where it's hard to apologize because it's painful carrying the guilt of it. So I really liked
Right.
what you said, that it's a moment of growth actually when you're failing, and that has been a major lesson for me. But it's taken a
Mm,
lot because of my upbringing. It's like it's just because there's so much self-attack in the religion that I'm from. But I think I
yeah.
understand you also in the way that you're comparing. I don't know if you're comparing, but you said you went from saying, the religion and the preaching, the teaching there, to what you are teaching your students. So there's also something on a societal level where we've went from a minister preaching to now we have to find somewhere else to learn about life and how we can thrive in it.
Yes. Yes. And the example I would use is that I think a lot, not all, but a lot of religion operates and uses a medium that I would describe as maladaptive perfectionism.
Yeah.
In the same way that kids and young people can have maladaptive perfectionism, which is, well, I have to be great at everything, and when I make a mistake, I have to really be hard on myself and beat myself up and feel ashamed and guilty.
Exactly.
Well, it turns out the kids and young people who really do well have high levels of expectation for achievement and growth, but they're very compassionate.
Mm.
So a religion that wants us to be better people has high standards, but that's very compassionate and nurturing would be the ideal system because um, here's the way I explain it. If you want to believe in a power that or a God that created all of this, why would he or she have created a human form like us that's so flexible, malleable, can grow and learn, but teach us a religion that's very punitive, dogmatic, and narrow, and that you
Mm.
can only have one way to grow, and if you fail, you've got to extract pain and suffer, right? I don't see that as compatible with a God that created a universe that's meant to flourish, to grow, to learn, to adapt, to love, to care. So
Exactly.
I just think religion is got to reinvent itself in the world because it's very relevant, but people are leaving it because it's become a form of maladaptive perfectionism.
Yeah, good way to say that. Yeah. Yeah, because in my idea and experience with religion is those kind of questions you can of course ask them, but you're never really gonna ask them because you believe in what is there, what is told, what is in the interpretation of the Bible that the congregation has or whatever. So there's
Mhm.
not really that kind of logic going on if you're really steeped in the faith. But
Mhm.
I hear you, and I hear your vision of another sort of religion. And
Yeah.
especially also, I like your word growth, right? It's a Scorpio word. It's like that is the aliveness. It is when we grow. And sometimes it's really through crisis and hardship. But other times it's just because you go to a self-development course or whatever is lighting you up and expanding you from where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about my story because it's really resonated with people. I did not think people would want to talk about it as much. I used it because it was an inspiration for me throughout my life and my work. I did not think people would want to talk as much about it, but here's the way I think about it. I was thinking recently about how all our brethren animal species engage in migration,
Yeah.
migratory journeys, fast, long, hard, difficult migratory journeys. They do it together. And what they're doing is going through a lot of danger and suffering so that they can go back to their birthplace and recreate the cycle of life.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what I saw myself doing. I had to migrate. That my trauma and my early life put me on a migratory journey to find a different birthplace where I could recreate something
Yeah.
and give life back to the world.
That's really good. And my listeners may not know that. That's because that the whole languishing is. How are you doing?
Well, it's very emotional.
Yeah, yeah, it's emotional. Yeah, yeah. So this is what is so great about your story and your book is that it's both, this whole for everyone, and then it's also deeply personal, right? Really deeply personal. And so being moved like that emotionally, I think that's part of flourishing rather than languishing, right? Because that's the absence of that. So,
Yeah,
so languishing is something is it sort of like a time pocket, something where you have been in
yeah.
and can you kind of know it from the inside in a way?
Well, I've seen it described in the ancient text as a rest of life. You know, when you arrest somebody for doing something, you immobilize them, you
Yeah.
chain them, and these people were free. They were seekers of spiritual growth and communion with God, and yet they would experience these moments that perplexed them, where it's as if life stopped and their life arrested. And that's what that stagnation and being stuck is all
Hmm.
about.
Hmm.
But it's also about what it must feel like when uh, to be empty.
Yeah.
There's just something about that state um, that you feel like you're dying inside,
Hmm.
that there's a death happening, and it's to me, languishing isn't necessarily a pathological thing. It can be a normal reaction to circumstances, so that it's an alarm. It's an alarm bell that's telling you to wake up. Something needs to change. And meaning you have to take steps to reclaim life. You have to reclaim a reason, a good reason for living, because the reasons you have now are killing you.
Yeah.
They're destroying your soul.
Wow.
They're destroying the meaning of your life. And languishing is an alarm bell telling you you're dying inside. Your spirit is dying. It's going somewhere.
It's
You're
really.
not living true to yourself. You're
Mm.
not living true to what it means to be fully human. You're just doing things that aren't authentic to you. And it's an alarm bell. And if you stay there too long, it does begin to destroy you. And I talk about all that stuff in the book, how It creates all kinds of problems in your life.
Yeah. And it's crazy how many people actually know this. I think also because of many of us didn't grow up with parents who were emotionally fluent. And so there's that piece missing for a lot of us. I really like what you just said, that the reasons you have for living is killing you. Wow. Yeah. And so those reasons needs to change. Mm.
Yeah, people use that language, but they don't recognize the answer is in their declaration. The answer to their challenge is in their declaration. They say they want something more.
Yeah.
And these are people talking sometimes. I have a good marriage. I have great kids. I'm successful by every other standard in life. And yet my soul is telling me I'm dying inside. And so the answer is in their declaration. The things that they lived for aren't enough. It's okay to do that. Don't get me wrong. You don't have to say, well, I'm going to leave my wonderful marriage. I'm going to abandon my kids. I'm going to leave a job. What? No, it means that's not enough. You're not living fully. And this is what I think we were talking about when your kids in your country and the kids in my country are saying, education is killing my soul because it's directed to one thing, economic success. But
Yeah.
that's only one part of a whole picture that makes us fully human.
I mean, and
That's
it's been an
yeah.
overemphasized piece, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. It really has, like, just shaping us to become that in a financial puzzle rather than thinking of us as whole people.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, the reasons you have for living aren't enough or they're killing you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why you're languishing.
Ah, correct. I'm dropping my notes here. Let's see. I only have one more note because our hour is almost up. But I wanted to just make this question. Flourishing peaks between the ages of 60 and 65 as many stresses diminish. And I was
Yeah.
like, I suspected that because I have been asking people in their 60s about, does it get easier also because of the life phase you are in? And not everyone is eager to admit that, but there's something about it, right? What do you
Right.
say?
Well, it's interesting to me that it's flourishing throughout, right? It begins to rise when we begin our adulthood and work, but it continues to rise. And here's what I think is happening. On average, as we work more, we begin to gain enough experience in work and then life, and maybe enough job mobility and prestige that we now have permission. We give ourselves permission to be who we really wanted
Mm,
to be.
yeah.
And then, right, so the decade right before you end your job, you're flourishing really high. And then the first decade after you left your job, you're even doing better because now I get to be who I really wanted to be. The problem is we think we can't be who we want to be and still be successful economically. And I think that's a myth. And we have to get rid of that. And that everything in our life has to be devoted to our work, or else we're a
Yeah.
failure.
There's that fear connected to it. I mean, but there is that realness of it as you are going through, you're not gonna work anymore, then you're not dependent on the money from that working environment, and you don't have to fear your boss, or maybe you don't exactly fear your boss, but there's something there that kind of censors you. You can't just say everything you want because it might be against policy.
Right. But I think more and more you get to say, we call it seniority in my country. I don't know what you call it. The more senior you become, I think the more you are empowered to
Yes.
be the full person you are at work. not just at home.
Yeah.
And so you start to realize what's important and what isn't important. And I hear this again and again, as we grow older, we realize that as we get to the end of the life, that I'm so much more complex, and I have a lot more to give than just what the world was telling me.
All along. Yeah.
And then I have a freedom that I never realized I had. And I wish, and then people say, I wish I hadn't spent all my time working. Well, we're all going to have to work. I
Yeah.
wish you hadn't spent your time limiting yourself and
Oh,
not
good one.
being right, not being who you are
Yeah.
throughout your life. And that's the thing. Uh, um, if I could send one message, it's okay to be who you are and be dress the way you want, express yourself the way you want, as long as you're not harming anybody or putting anyone else down. Be the best version of who you are, and you're much more likely to be flourishing. I don't care what economic condition you are in. I saw this in my grandparents who were very poor. Um, they were the best version they could be
Oh.
for themselves, but the world around them. And they were flourishing. Um, and they didn't try to live beyond their means because they didn't try to pretend. But what they had, they gave away. They shared it because they believed that whatever they had was valuable. So my grandmother baked bread in almost every day. And if any of my friends showed up that day, they would leave the house with some cinnamon rolls and freshly baked bread to bring home to their home. Or if they wanted to eat dinner, they were, of course, if they showed up around 4 o'clock, they were staying unless they had to go home. They would share the warmth and of our home and their food. And I'm telling you, the best thing you have to give is of yourselves.
Mm.
Your food, your spirit, your joy, your kindness. And all my grandparents had to give was their food, their warmth, their kindness.
Oh. Yeah, so I'm hearing you because you say that when in that age stresses diminish, but actually being yourself is less stressful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the stress is gonna diminish whatever age you are. If you could be more true to what would you say? More true to your values and what you're feeling, true to what?
Well, yes, your values, what you care about, and you don't have to be militant about what you care about. You don't need to advertise what you care about to the world. You just have to act on it. That's what matters.
Yeah.
There's no good reason to have values if you don't live them, because then
No.
you will, again, that will destroy you. If you care about something but you don't act on it, you will begin to feel empty, because that's what your soul is there for. It's calling you to live your values, live your life. When you don't live your life,
It's deadening.
you start to, yes, that's how we feed our soul. That's how we feed ourselves.
It is
Um,
so good, Corey. Did you have a last remark there?
no, no, just that it's amazing to me. I've always been an artist at heart. I'm a scientist. I love science. But what we do speaks to things like our spirit, our soul, our sense of aliveness, our legacy, things that may not be quantifiable, but are relevant. And so when I can take science and talk about it in the ways that we are talking about it, it brings it full circle. It ends where I began,
Yeah.
with just the search for something intangible. And so the science brings us back to things that are very meaningful to people, but Um, you can't touch it, you can't grab it, but you know it's there.
And it's got to be subjective, I guess, what is meaningful to people. So,
Yeah.
but that there is something that is scientific, as you say, that there is that need for something deeper.
Yes, we know it's there. We know it matters because literally people say they're hungry for it.
Yeah.
They use words as if it's tangible, like I could eat something and get that feeling away. No, what it's telling you is that your spirit needs to be fed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is what many of us is dyslexic in. Like we have not learned it, and we've come out like we can't read that, we can't compute it, but we can train that ability, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And you know when somebody we can see each other's, we can feel each other's energy, we can see each other's
Absolutely.
spirit. You're and it's there. I know it's there. And
I
that's how
totally
we
feel it.
it's yeah, and that's what we give to each other and what we leave behind. That's our legacy. Whether we leave a good spirit or a bad spirit with other people.
Mm, yeah. That energy, that spark, I
That's
definitely feel it. So happy to meet you, Corey. I've really been looking forward, and you delivered. You didn't let me down.
Thank you. Thank
It
you.
was really, really good. So I'm hoping for making a number two, because I'll be reading the next part of your book.
Yes. Yes.
So
I'd love to see what questions you have for part two.
for that section, great, great. Well, we'll be in touch on that. Thank you so
Okay.
much for participating here and sharing your wisdom and your passion and all of this that you
Oh,
have learned through life. So great.
yes. You're most welcome, and I enjoyed it very much.